Hello everybody, Brantley here again. Section 7, Exporting Models. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of Exporting 101. So there are programs all over the world, thousands and millions of programs, and sometimes you learn how to use these programs and you don't really know how to share your work between maybe other programs or within programs that do the same functions. So today we're going to talk about exporting. We're going to talk about the different 3D export formats and similarities between some and differences, and also ones that are most popular. So let's go ahead and jump into that. First off, I just want to explain pretty quickly, what does a 3D file contain? So when you go in there and you save your Blender file or you export your Blender file into a 3D file of some type, which we'll get into in the next slide, what are you really trying to save? What are you trying to put in there that is saved in that file? Well, number one is geometry. So you are trying to save your object that you've created, correct? You have your geometry, which is the shape of your object, however many vertices and faces and tries it has as part of your geometry. Some file types save geometry more precise than others, and we'll get into that shortly. If you see the picture there on the right, that is a 3D object sword that I created called Orkinder. It was for a book that I'm writing, and I wanted to be able to put that into a video game as an asset, and so I kind of created it and put it into Unity. That's a picture of it finished in 3D. So you see the geometry, the bone hilt, the handle, the blade. Then next you have colors, textures, and materials. So that's basically what it says, the color of your object, if you have any textures that you've painted on, brushed on, the different materials that make up that coloring sequence. That's all part of your 3D object that needs to be saved. Some file types will save that, others won't. Then you have your scene, which is your lights and your cameras. So basically there are a couple lights in this 3D picture here. Those dotted lines that are kind of crisscrossing in the middle of the blade, those are actually lights to see the object and to render it. And so also you have a camera in your scene in a lot of 3D. When you open up Blender without any opening any other files, and when it opens up to its default opening, there is always a camera, a light, and a cube inside the scene. And so that's your scene, where you have different lights and cameras. And then the last one is your animations that you create can also be saved in certain file types and things. And some save animations and others ignore it. So that's basically what a 3D file will contain. You'll have geometry, you'll have your colors, your textures, your materials, you'll have your scene, where are your lights located, where's your camera located, and then your animations. And so that's quite a bit of information to save, and different file types do it in different ways. So let's go ahead and jump into the most common ones for today. Blender also services all of these file types. So these are the most popular exporting formats within Blender 3D and also throughout the 3D world, I guess you could say. First and foremost is Collada. So this one is pretty popular. It saves everything you would really need in order to transition from maybe Blender to another 3D program, let's say. It supports geometry, it saves your color, it saves your textures, your materials, and also it saves scene info, so like your lights and your camera, and it also supports animations. And even better, it has a little bit of kinematics and physics, because there's a lot of physics that go on when you are animating or creating a 3D world. You have to have certain physics that go apart with that. And that's .dae. So Collada is pretty much opened. It's a neutral format that'll pretty much be open with any other program that is 3D. Should be able to read Collada. It's gaining momentum. It's really popular. It's kind of like the go-to for going from one program to another. Then you have 3D Studio, .3ds. This one's pretty limited. The geometry only saves up to 65,536 triangles. Not that much. So it's a very basic geometry. It does save your color and textures and your materials. and it also supports scene information, but it ignores animation. So your .3ds, not very good if you want precise geometry to be saved. It's not going to be for like if you're going to create something that really needs to be precise in your manufacturing or anything like that. So then you have your FBX file, your .fbx. This is a very popular one for transporting your 3D objects. This records your geometry. It can do it more precise than 3D Studio. It also does your colors, textures, your materials, and it also supports animations as well as scene info. This is actually the file format that we're going to use to export our sword from Blender into our Unity game engine for the bonus material in this course. Next, you have your wavefront, your .obj. This is another popular file. It records your geometry. It does record your colors, textures, and materials, but as you can see here on the slide, it does it in a separate .mtl file, which is different, but it gets the job done. It does, however, ignore animation and scene information, so if you wanted to bring that along with you, it would not do the trick, your .obj. You're better to go with your .fbx or your collada.dae. Then you have X3D, extensible, your .x3d. This is an XML-based saving format. So XML is pretty much your World Wide Web, your internet, websites, web pages. This supports everything that you would need, supports geometry, color, textures, materials, scene info, and animation, but it does it for specifically best for the World Wide Web. So if you're having a website that you want to add a 3D object to, this is the format you're going to want to use. And then lastly, very popular for 3D printing is the STL, your .stl. This is mainly for 3D printing and manufacturing. It does approximate geometry, which means it does it more precise than, say, your basic geometry like 3D Studio, but it ignores everything else. So it's just geometry, which is why they can use this for manufacturing and 3D printing, because you're not really worrying about color or a scene or animations. You're just worried about that geometry being as precise as it needs to be. Of course, our 3D printers don't go up to I think it's like only like a half a millimeter or something, or maybe like 0.3 millimeters or something of approximation. So it works perfect for 3D printing, and I use the STL file quite a bit for my 3D printer. That's basically what it's for. So when you export it as your object as an STL, you can pretty much 3D print it as long as it meets the other parameters for 3D printing, which we're not going to get into in this course. So here we are in Blender. I just wanted to quickly, since we went through those slides, let's go ahead and just let me show you where the export tab is. Basically just the file export. Of course you need to have an object selected. So let's say we're selecting our low poly sword with all of its beautiful colors. Go ahead and file. Now the export is able to be selected. You see we have the Collada there, the Alembic, but that's not very popular. FBX, your motion capture, which is more for obviously video things. It's grayed out because we don't have any of that here for an armature and stuff. Then you have your wavefront, your .obj, your X3D, your STL. So if I wanted to 3D print this, I'd definitely use my STL. We're going to use the FBX, export our sword into Unity. So let's go ahead and click FBX. And now that we have our sword selected, it's telling us where do we want to save it as an FBX file. We would leave everything here as the default. You can keep the scale as 1. If you're 3D printing, you'd want to maybe change the scale a little bit and make sure that it's in meters as far as the Blender file goes before exporting it. Also, you want to make sure selected objects is checked, and we're going to go through this more when we get into the next video, but just wanted to show you how this is here. So this way, if you have this selected, it's going to just export the object that you have selected. It's not going to pack everything that's in your scenes together. Because if we were to not check the just selected, it would actually go and pack our high poly sword. It would also do this low poly one that I have over in this other layer here. And it would also do this scene that I had set up because I was going to render the sword, and I didn't really do anything with that because we didn't need to. We just had the lights. So it would package all that together if you didn't have selected only selected there. So that's pretty much it for this video.